What's up, guys? Welcome back to another daily Bible reading snapshot. Today we're looking at Lamentations 3, 4, and 5 here in the Old Testament, then Hebrews chapter 8 in the New Testament. Now, I said in the book of Lamentations there was hope somewhere. We're going to find it right here in chapter 3. It says, first of all, before there's hope, Jeremiah says, I'm a man who has seen affliction. I have seen God be good to the people and God be bad to the people. And now we see all this evil taking place in the land. Why? Why did it take place? Remember, yesterday it said because of the people's sin. God is not unjust. God is just enacting justice here. And he says he's seen terrible things. He's made his teeth to grind on gravel. He's made him cower in the ashes. My soul is bereft of peace. I've forgotten what happiness is, right? How does he get to that place? Well, because of all the terrible stuff that was going on. He says, my endurance has perished. So has my hope from the Lord. He says, I'm done. I just feel so overwhelmed and terrible. I'm done. Then he says, remember my affliction and my wandering, the wormwood and the gall, the bitterness that's in my body here. My soul continually remembers it and is bowed down within me. But this I will call to mind, and therefore I will have hope. He says, but this is what I remember. In all of the bad stuff that's going on in this world, here's what I remember. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. It never goes away. And his mercies never come to an end. Ever? Even here? Even when the people are being destroyed? Even when there's terrible stuff going on in the cities and the streets? And are you sure that God's steadfast love never ceases? The answer is never. And even they are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. What kind of mercies was Jeremiah seeing in this time? I don't know. We know some of them, that Gedaliah was set up as a governor for a little bit. Nebuzaradan showed him peace and helped Jeremiah after the exile. I don't know all the mercies that he's talking about, but he says, I can recognize that there are mercies that are new every morning. God's faithfulness is great. His steadfast love, his loyalty to his people, his loyalty to show his people goodness. It is faithful forever. Great is his faithfulness. Then he says, the Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him. And when you're going through hard times like this, that's one of the things you'll have to do. You will have to say to your soul, just like it says in Psalm 103, you'll have to remind yourself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore, I will hope in him. I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him. To the soul who seeks him, it is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for a man to bear the yoke in his youth, right? It's good for him to go through something hard while he's young because he'll look to God for salvation here. It says the Lord will not cast off forever, verse 31. But though he causes grief, he will have compassion according to the abundance of his salvation. For he does not willingly afflict or grieve the children of men. He doesn't do things for no reason. People do not experience hard times for no reason, which is like, how does that even work? I can't even understand all that. Well, Job didn't understand it either. God didn't even tell Job why. He just explained that God does what he does. And Jeremiah says here, I trust that God doesn't afflict people for no reason. He is going to have a purpose for all of this. Then he says, why should a man complain about the punishment of his sins? That's a great question. Some of us are tempted to complain after we've sinned and God is giving us some discipline. We're tempted to complain and say, why has God made this happen to me? Why has God punished me for my sin in this way? He says, should you really complain about however God punishes you for sin? Whatever punishment God shows you for sin, short of sending you to hell, is a gracious thing. It's gracious because he's saying you deserve worse than that, right? Even the bad stuff going on, they deserved worse. He says, let us test ourselves, examine our ways, and return to the Lord. Let us lift up our hearts and our hands to the God in heaven, say this, we have transgressed and rebelled, and you have not forgiven. Right, I'm experiencing the wrath of God, but I want to turn to God. Then he says, my eyes flow without ceasing. Right, I'm crying without respite, without a break. I'm always constantly going to God and crying about this. Chapter 4 says, the gold has grown dim. All the things in the city that were so powerful and so amazing, so glorious, now it just looks pretty dim. It says, the tongue of the nursing infants sticks to the roof of their mouth for thirst. Right? Even these moms aren't even able to feed their kids in this hard time. The children beg for food. just terrible things are going on here. Happier were the victims of the sword than the victims of hunger, right? Which sounds interesting. Would you rather be killed by the sword or rather languish away and die of hunger and starvation, right? Well, he says even the people who died initially, they had a better end than the people now. It says the hands of compassionate women have boiled their own children. The tenderest mom that would never do anything to hurt their kid. It says they have boiled the flesh of their own children because they were desperate and their kids have died and there's no hope and there's nothing to eat and they just have to eat their own child. I mean, horrible stuff is going on here. It says, this was for the sins of her prophets and the iniquities of her priests who shed in the midst of her the blood of the righteous. Verse 11 says, the Lord gave full vent to his wrath. That's what was going on here. Just for their iniquity, they're bearing their sin. Verse 5 talks about this. He says, restore us, remember us, O Lord. Which remember, something interesting I want you to note. What happens in the book of Exodus? Exodus 1, I think of Exodus 1 and 2, where it says that the people of Israel were in hard service before Egypt. Right? In Egypt, they were slaves. And it says that God saw and that God knew, right? He remembered them. He knew their trouble. He knew what was going on. And same thing here. It says, remember us, O God. When things are going terrible in our life, we need to say, remember us, O God. Then he says in verse 19 at the end here, your throne, O Lord, is forever. Your throne endures for all generations. Why do you forget us forever? God, don't forget us. Why do you forsake us for so many days? Restore us to yourself, O Lord. Renew our days as of old, unless you've utterly rejected us and remain exceedingly angry with us. And the answer is God is going to do something good in Judah. He's going to accomplish these purposes. Whenever we see hard times, we need to remember if you are one of God's people, God has a plan, he has a purpose for every pain, and he's going to cause something good for his glory to come out of it, even if you don't understand what it is right now. So that's our Old Testament reading. That's the book of Lamentations. Now we're looking at Hebrews chapter 8 here in the New Testament. Hebrews 8, continue to talk about how Jesus is a high priest. That's a big part of this section here. Because remember, they were tempted to go back to other things. And they were tempted to be looking to other priests. Remember that. That's why he talks about how Jesus is a better priest. He says, remember that the ministers that served, that Jesus is a minister who served in the holy place in the true tent, the reality, okay? So what God did when he set up the tabernacle and the temple, what was he doing? Not that they weren't real or anything, but he was making a picture. He was copying something that's true somewhere else, that Jesus is the real priest that serves in heaven before God, and what's happened on earth is just a shadow and a picture of that. And what he's saying is there is another covenant that's being made, and the reason this new covenant is being made is because there's something lacking in the first covenant. He's saying, and then he quotes Jeremiah 31, which is that passage we looked at recently. Jeremiah 31, verse 31 to 34, says we need a new covenant. It says, and speaking of a new covenant, he makes the first one obsolete. And what is obsolete is growing old and is about to vanish away, which I think is pointing forward to where the temple's about to be destroyed for these Hebrew people. There's not even going to be opportunity for them to go back to serve in this temple because it's just going to be gone in a way. They can't even serve God in the same way. That's why Jews today who want to serve God, there's no sacrifices, there's no temple, there's nothing for them to do like they used to do back even in the days when this is being written. So I think when you look at this, you need to see something that Jesus, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday in chapter 7, Jesus and what he does is not some secondary plan, right? Christianity is not some new religion. I hate when people say that. They say, oh, Christianity is just a new religion after Judaism. No, it's not. It's just the true people of God. There's nothing different about it. I mean, there's something different about it, but even here, he says it's a new covenant, yes, but it's based on the same things that have taken place. It's the same God. It's the point. This is what everything was pointing forward towards. It was pointing forward to Jesus, which is helpful when we look at this. Don't worship the shadows. Don't think, oh, I wish I lived back in the Old Testament when there were sacrifices, because then I'd really understand sin, right? That's ridiculous, right? You know what really helps you understand sin? The fact that Jesus died for sin. The Son of God put to death. You have more clarity. You have John 4, right? It no longer, it doesn't matter where you worship anymore. It matters if you're worshiping in spirit and in truth. Be thankful. Thank God every day that you are living a part of God's new covenant people who, the reality of the new covenant is we haven't even experienced the fullness of it yet. One day we will experience the total fullness of this new thing that God is doing when we live in a perfect world with God forever. That's something we should get excited about every day. So thanks for reading. We'll see you back tomorrow for another daily Bible reading snapshot. you.